Hello, hello. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day so far. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Purple Chair Chats. If you are unfamiliar with this series of live videos, this is where Jana's campaign staff works to instill knowledge, skills, and values that are oh so necessary to prevent gender and relationship violence. And we do this by taking a closer look at some specific subtopics within the different issues that we cover at Janet's campaign. So for those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Megan Woodfield. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve Janet's campaign as an education and prevention specialist. If you are unfamiliar, this month of January is nationally recognized as Stalking Awareness Month, or NSAM, National Stalking Awareness Month. And that is going to be the focus of our chat today. So we're going to talk about the history of NSAM. We're going to get into some statistics to really ground ourselves in the reality of this public health issue, as well as talking about prevention, some ways that you can be a great supporter. And of course, I'm going to leave you with resources. Can't forget about those. While it is my hope that you find this content really engaging and helpful, I do want to be transparent and acknowledge that this can be an uncomfortable thing to discuss and to listen to. While some discomfort is obviously positive because it helps us to grow and expand, I do want to give the content warning that for folks who are currently or have experienced any kind of gender and relationship violence, especially stalking, this might be a little bit activating for you. So I really encourage you to use your best judgment on if right now is going to be the best time to engage with this content. This is recorded, so it will be put up later if you want to come back and check it out, but please take what you need in order to feel safe, and remember that I will be sharing resources at the end of the video, or if you're watching the replay, you can just skip to the end and grab those if you're needing them in the moment. Excuse me, sorry, breakfast's coming up. So let's get into the background around this, okay? So NSAM began in response to a 2003 call to the Stalking Resource Center from Debbie Riddle. She is the sister of a murdered stalking victim, Peggy Kinkle, and Riddle really wanted to use her family's painful tragedy into a force for good. Definitely something we know about here at Jana's campaign. And her goal was to help improve law enforcement's response to stalking and ultimately save lives. So in 2003, the National Center for Victims of Crime, in partnership with Representative Heather Wilson out of New Mexico and Lifetime Television, told Peggy's story at a congressional briefing on Capitol Hill, which again was really focused on strengthening law enforcement's response to crime and helping them learn some lessons from her experience. That same day, Representative Wilson introduced a congressional resolution to support National Stalking Awareness Month. In January of 2004, the National Center for Victims of Crimes launched NSAM, or National Stalking Awareness Month, with the goal to increase the public's understanding of the crime of stalking. It emerged from the work of the Stalking Resource Center, a national center program funded by the Office Against Women, the U.S. Department of Justice, and again was really centered around raising awareness around stalking and helping to develop multidisciplinary responses to crimes. Words are a little bit wonky for me today, so please forgive me. In 2011, this was the first time that we saw a president speak on NSAM. So the first presidential proclamation came from President Obama. His proclamation stressed the millions affected by the crime, its often devastating consequences, and the difficulty of identifying and investigating the crime. The federal government does have a strong commitment to combating stalking, but they've been working off of not great information up until that point. And then the following year, in 2012, the proclamation further elaborated on the dangers of stalking, the importance of NSAM, and building awareness around the crime. But if you think that's the end of the background, oh no, friends, because this year in 2024, we have another first when it comes to our stalking awareness. So we are going to have the first ever National Day of Action this year. So be sure to mark your calendars for January 18th. And the theming that they're putting around this day of action is to wear your best sparkly outfit, as we are bringing back the sparkle for Peggy Clinkley, and for all of the victims and survivors of stalking. And this is being led by the Stalking Prevention Awareness Resource Center, or SPARC, and all of those wonderful organizations that I mentioned previously. So again, that is January 18th, and stay tuned on our social media because we'll definitely share out more information about that. So let's get into what is stalking. There's a lot of differences within definitions because stalking varies legally between different jurisdictions. But our partners at the Stalking Prevention and Awareness Resource Center, or SPARC, categorize it as a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person that will cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety, the safety of others, or suffer substantial emotional distress. There's quite a bit in that, but the really key points is one, that it's a pattern of behavior. So this isn't like a one-time incident. This is something that we're seeing happen on a regular, frequent basis. And that fear element, which we can see manifest in a lot of different forms. You know, for years when people thought about stalking, it was like a creepy stranger who was hiding in a bush and like trying to watch you. But now, thanks to research and some very, very brave survivors who have come forward to tell their story, we can start to combat some of those misinterpretations. So the reality is that most stalking is going to occur by someone who is known to that victim and survivor. And while being followed physically and someone showing up places are definitely key components of stalking, what we've noticed trend-wise within the last several years is that technology is really becoming more at the forefront. So using things like social media, data tracking, and location services as a tool for folks who are engaging in those stalking-based behaviors. Behaviors that are congruent with stalking can actually be put into four main categories. And this is in accordance to TK Logan's work, Connecting the Dots. So we see surveillance as one, life invasion, intimidation, and interference, or the SIL acronym that we'll have some posts coming up about later this month. So when we're talking about surveillance, surveillance is going to include watching, tracking, or gathering information. Life invasion is kind of what we had mentioned with showing up places. So showing up in that targeted person's life where someone definitely does not want them to be. The next one we're going to have is interference. So this could be sabotage, attacking, humiliating, or otherwise changing that victim's life for the worse. And then intimidation really refers to the threatening or the scare tactics that stalkers will use in order to try to keep that power and control over the person that they're hoping to victimize. This was a very condensed breakdown of stalking, so if you want to learn more about this and really want some good in-depth information, I highly encourage you to check out our NSAM toolkit. You can find that on our website, januscampaign.org/awareness-toolkits. And of course, we will share that out for y'all as well. In terms of the impact, Eric Blau et al. Describes that because stalking behaviors are often persistent, unpredictable, and they can take place over a really long period of time, what we're seeing is repeated trauma that's being built up and up. So naturally, as we can assume from those of us who have a background around trauma, this is something that's going to impact a victim's holistic health. So we're talking physical health, emotional health, really causing for that fear. It of course impacts the friends and family who are support people and are trying to help them navigate through this situation. We see financial stability being impacted, and especially jobs. A lot of stalkers will show up at somebody's place of work. And so that can bring in a bunch of different difficulties, especially if that employer is maybe not as familiar with stalking and doesn't know how to properly help support that person. So as a result of all of those bits that I have just mentioned, what we have found through research is that people who have experienced stalking have a higher prevalence for anxiety, insomnia, social dysfunction, and also have severe depression at higher rates than our general population. Not good, not what we want to see. Some statistics to really help ground us in this, because the unfortunate thing with stalking is because of the documentation and the data that's needed to support it, and the fact that, let's be honest, we minimize stalking a lot in our media and in conversations. I think sometimes folks don't understand the severity of this and how many people it impacts. So again, to help ground us in this issue, we see 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men will report experiencing stalking at some point within their lifetimes. And while we know that these types of crimes can occur across the lifespan, what they've noticed is that about half of victims of stalking do indicate that they were stalked before the age of 25, and nearly 1 in 4 report being stalked before the age of 18. So, especially wanting to make sure that our young people have access to this information and understand what it looks like so we can help support our youth. Anyone can be a victim of stalking, as is true with any other form of gender and relationship violence. However, we've been able to identify some higher impact areas where folks have a more high propensity to experience it. So within that, we see women, young adults, individuals with physical or intellectual disabilities, and then members of the LGBTQ plus community. So those who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer do experience this at higher rates. So again, being aware of that, that way we can get this information into good hands and we understand who's being impacted. It is a really common misconception when it comes to stalking that this is a behavior that occurs when someone is leaving a relationship, or it's after a relationship ends that we see it. But actually, about 57% of people who have reported stalking do say that those experiences have begun before a relationship has ended. So while it is something that we see in a lot of cases in the aftermath, it is something that can happen during that relationship as well. And then in terms of talking about the stalkers themselves, about 1 in 3 or a third of those who engage in stalking based behaviors have done so before. So what we learned for that is that we're seeing a lot of repeat offenders when it comes into this, which is true across a lot of different types of gender and relationship violence. Stalking is also something that has a really big tie-in with other crimes. And by that I mean often when we're seeing stalking within an unhealthy and abusive relationship, it's not the only form of violence that we see. About 48% of sexual assault survivors, specifically within that 18 to 24 category, report also experiencing stalking within their relationships. And about 81% of people stalked by a survey have found that they were also physically assaulted by that partner. So we see domestic violence, we see physical violence. When we're talking about that fear and intimidation, definitely getting into our emotional and psychological forms of abuse. So you can kind of start to see it's a very tangled web that gets weaved when we're getting into discussing this. And part of why I'm really fortunate that there is so much better education and research that is out there. So now that we have a good grounding, let's get into what the heck we can do about it, because I think we can all agree this is not something that we want to see within our communities. And the fortunate thing is that this is preventable. So let's talk about how we can do that, okay? So the first thing is really empowering folks to understand, recognize, and address these stalking behaviors when they're seen. We can do that by using bystander intervention strategies, such as being direct, which is confronting the behavior head on, delegating or referring to someone else to get that support, or distract, which is what I like to call the wild card option, and trying to turn the conversation away from the current topic. These are things that you can use if someone is making minimizing comments around stalkings. That delegate is really going to be good when referring to advocates or law enforcement and trying to get support. But we have to understand what we're saying, and we also have to be willing to be a little bit vulnerable and step out and call out those behaviors, right? Especially mobilizing non-victims as allies in this. So I myself have not personally experienced stalking, and we need more folks who are in that kind of category of saying, just because this hasn't happened to me, or maybe you don't know somebody that it's happening to, recognizing that you have so much power to help it not have to happen to anybody, and learning more about that so we can see that happen within our communities. Creating and supporting safe environments within relationships, schools, and communities through programs and policies that are going to reduce that risk and really support healthy relationships. So reaching out to Jana's campaign, we would love to come out and do a presentation at your community group or within your schools, but also making sure within our personal relationships, that we're showing that we're people who folks can come to talk about this, that we care about this issue. And there's lots of different ways you can do that, from having discussions that are specifically about that to sharing this video and saying, hey, I learned something. I want to share this education with folks and let them know that there's things that we can do to help be positive change agents. Speaking of which, using the power of your voice and your vote to support legislation that is aimed at prevention education. I don't like to get into politics too much, but I'm not telling you what to do or who to vote for. Simply just reminding that when we're looking towards different elections, when we are getting into opportunities to vote based on legislation, whether it is community resources who rely on funding that is put forward through that, whether you're trying to get this education into schools, and so making sure that schools are aware of it, that's a really great way that we can help support these folks. And then, of course, continuing to educate yourself and others on the dynamics of unhealthy relationships. And there's some really great resource centers that you can reach out to for that. Of course, Jana's campaign, we have our toolkit, as I've mentioned. We are always putting out content on our social medias, and of course, we would love to come and engage with you in person. Some other online centers that you can look into is Spark, which I had mentioned earlier. That's Stalking Prevention and Resource Center. The United States Department of Justice also has a category on their website around stalking. The CDC does as well. Safety Net Project, which is focused really specifically on our online tools and kind of being safe in our online spaces. The National Organization for Victim Assistance, SHARP, the Women's Law Center, which is not just for women, but that is what it came up and about for, and then our Cybercrime Support Network. These are all going to be really great places where you can go to learn more and kind of continue with the great information that we're starting in today. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how we can support those who are impacted by this, because it's one of the most frequent questions that I get when I've been out and about in schools or just talking with folks is, regardless of background, it can sometimes be hard to be that support. So here are the things that we recommend. First things first, as simple as it may sound, saying phrases like, I believe you, validating a survivor when they're sharing their story and experience with you can be so, so powerful. As a society, we're not always the best with understanding that victims are not at fault for their experiences, and some of our systemic processes can put a lot of harm. So as a support person, really leaning into, I believe you, I support you. I maybe don't know what to do, but I will be here with you and help guide you and support you on this journey. That's something that can be super powerful. When engaging in conversations, really we're focusing on the offender's actions and not the victim's responses. So again, trying to make that shift happen and focus on the person who has committed these acts is the one who's in the wrong, and that's what we want to bring attention to, not how a victim has responded or how they're attempting to work through the heinous things that have happened to them, right? Respecting their privacy, it is a really beautiful thing when a survivor feels comfortable to share their story. It can be really hard and really vulnerable to do so. So making sure that if you are in that role of being a listener while they're speaking, that we're not coming at this from an investigator standpoint where we're trying to get a lot of information and really understand things in depth, recognizing that it's ultimately up to them what they feel comfortable sharing, being happy that they feel comfortable with us, because it is a big compliment to have someone come to you with that, but not trying to push them past what they're comfy with. Referring them to resources, which we'll go over here in a moment, and especially encouraging them to create safety planning. We have a whole purple chair chat that is specifically about safety planning, so if you have questions on that, really encourage you to go back and watch that. We chatted with our friends at Options with that, and I think there's some really good content there. And then encouraging them to seek help and document. The crime of stalking really heavily relies on documentation to prove that pattern of behavior that I had mentioned. Excuse me. So if the person who you were trying to support already is doing documentation, fabulous. Help them with that, making sure we have things like the date, the time, the location. Were there witnesses around? Was there certain technology used in providing a brief description of what occurred? Or if that's not something that they feel comfortable doing, asking them if they would be okay if you help them out with some of that documentation, especially if reporting to law enforcement is in alignment with justice. That can be a really great thing with helping to move that forward. And then trying to save everything possible related to the incident. So whether that's taking screenshots, keeping things posted somewhere safe, recording web addresses, just again, really wanting to be conscious of our tech related safety. So if the stalker has done stuff to interfere with that person's phone, again, that's where as a support person, you can be really great because they likely don't have that stuff attached to your technology. So you can help keep that for them. Alrighty, well, we're starting to wrap up here a little bit, so I want to go over some different resources with y'all. As always, if you or someone you know has been impacted by stalking or any other form of gender and relationship violence, I hope you know that you are loved, that you are believed, and there are so many people who are in the business of helping you. And so really encouraging you to reach out and to contact some of those resources. Some of those resources include the National Center for Victims of Crime, which you can reach at victimsofcrime.org or at 1-202-467-8700. Victim Connect, which you can reach at victimconnect.org, or 1-855-484-2846. The Cyber Civil Rights Initiative Helpline, which can be reached at cybercivilrights.org or 844-878-2274. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, which can be reached at thehotline.org. Their phone number is 1-800-799-7233. Or for our native Spanish speakers, you can reach them at 1-800-787-3224, and that will give you access to Spanish language help. The National Sexual Assault Hotline, which can be reached at RAINN, which is RAINN.org, or 1-800-656-4673. The Strong Hearts Native Helpline, which if you remember from our previous conversation about Indigenous peoples, is specifically for those who identify as Indigenous. So you can reach them at strongheartshelpline.org or 844-762-8483. The National Deaf Domestic Hotline, which is going to have video phone capabilities for those who are needing it. That is going to be thedeafhotline.org or 855-812-1001. The Network La Red LGBTQ Plus Hotline, which can be reached at www.tnlr.org or at 800-832-9101. And lastly, Love is Respect, which you can reach at loveisrespect.org or 1-888-331-9474. A lot of content. We'll share out more stuff, but that is the time that I have for this Purple Chair Chat. I want to thank y'all so much again for spending some time with me this afternoon and learning a little bit more about something that is so crucial for folks to have a good understanding of. If you have enjoyed this content and you like this format, we do Purple Chair Chats every single month. So our next one is actually going to be on February the 1st, and that is going to be specifically over Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, or TDVAM, which is nationally recognized in the month of February. So super excited for that. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.